And we are live. 3, 2, 1, boom. So we are live. What's up? How are you? Great to see you. Are you still in Shenzhen, Guangdong, China? Where are you residing in? And do you like it there in China?
Yes. Hi, Wayne. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. We are based here in Shenzhen. Yes, we are we're very close to the border with Hong Kong, the city in general, and also where I am. So I'm like way in the south of the city. So it's been great. We've been here this whole time. Sometimes like your video gets frozen a little bit, so I'm not sure if you can still see me or hear me.
I can still see you. I can hear you loud and clear. So if any time, if there's some distraction, I will just exit from this broadcast studio, re-enter, and then things should be fine after that. I understand you're behind a firewall, so you're calling in through the VPN, right?
Yes. I had to use that. Yes. So it's that's why it's a little bit unpredictable.
That's great. So these are the hurdles that we'll definitely overcome. And I think so far, so good. I'm going to just dive right into the first question for our audience. 80% of them are made of CMOs and 20% are entrepreneurs and founders. So I think a lot of value to add and to provide for them who are all tuning in right now. I think the first thing they are really curious is why China? Why did you choose, a really great place in America where you studied, right, in the film school? And after that, you decided to quit your major role, I think, in Procter Gamble. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And
yes.
After your stints there, why did you decide to have this radical change and move to China?
Yes, so that's very true. I did have a radical change. I was at Procter Gamble for 5 years. And what happened was that I was working in marketing and I really needed a change. And when I quit, I didn't actually know what that change was going to be. So I spent about more than a year, kind of just traveling and exploring. And I think film found me. I don't know if I was looking to get into filmmaking. And I just started making videos with some friends. We were doing theater and improv, and we started writing for a late night comedy segment on TV. And then I realized we had no idea what we were doing. Everything that we created was just so strange and not very good. So I thought, okay, I need to go to school and study this properly, because I had never studied filmmaking or media creation or anything. So then I got a scholarship. I was on the Fulbright scholarship to New York. And I was there for 2 years. And then I was finishing up in New York, and then realized that I needed to figure out where to go next. And my partner and I, he has some Chinese roots. He also had never lived in China before. And so we realized that, Shenzhen might be an interesting place to go to next. And we've been here ever since for 5 years.
This is fantastic. I love your personal story. And I think, everyone, when they go through life, right, they will have a midlife crisis. So I think maybe... is that something I would even classify as a midlife crisis for you to decide to move from a Fortune 500 company and then decide to drop everything and go over to China to build your own video production studio?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe you can call it an early midlife crisis. Sure, why not?
Then this question will definitely be for those who are familiar with P&G. Can you take the P&G out of the P&G-er? I think I came across from one of your other interviews, and it really stood out for me because that's a really nice way, right, to actually ask you, the difference, between working in a culture that is so remarkably different than what you have right now in Guangdong, China, where it's more like a startup lifestyle, right?
Definitely. It's been such a huge change, and I think also the more I venture out, working and kind of leading our little team here in our startup, the more I realize that the kind of lessons that working in a Fortune 500 company early on in life, the kind of lessons that you learn from there, that's the kind of training I would never forget. And I often talk to other P&G alumni about this, and we all kind of feel very similarly that we've been they used a term called being proctorized. So we've all been proctorized to a great extent, and we always do things. A lot of times we do things the P&G way, or we try to figure out how we would do things if we were still in P&G. And I think that's really helped in terms of management of time, in terms of communication, in terms of leadership, in terms of creating processes for my own company. I think that training at P&G was really vital for me.
This is fantastic. And of course, we need to ask you that question. Do you need to speak, or learn the language before you move over there? Like, do you speak Mandarin or Cantonese?
I do not. Unfortunately, I do not. I came here and it was also my first time being an entrepreneur. And I realized I can either be an entrepreneur or I can learn a new language. I cannot do both things at the same time. So for the last 5 years, my life has just been 24/7 entrepreneurship and trying to figure everything out as I go along. I feel like, and this is kind of like my approach in general, like I always jump first and I think later. So I definitely jumped headalong first, and there was really no space to learn Mandarin alongside. But now I do have an understanding of the language in the sense that I can kind of figure out my way around like daily life. And I understand way more than I can speak. But yeah, I definitely cannot conduct business meetings or anything in Mandarin.
That's definitely a very courageous thing to do, to actually go to an unfamiliar territory, right? And totally not mastering the language. And I think you're still figuring out how to communicate with your team members and your clients, right? But I think it's a huge city, and I've been to Shenzhen, I think 4 times last year. What struck me the most is that it's a very cosmopolitan city, and being near to Hong Kong definitely has its benefits. So maybe you can maybe just tell us whether it's one of your favorite things to do in Shenzhen is to maybe go to the Dongmen Market in Shenzhen, otherwise known as the Dongmen Pedestrian Street. Is that one of your favorite places, or the largest outdoor market there, right? Do you hang out there, very often? And do you also go to Huaqiangbei to shop for your tech products?
Yes, especially when we first moved here, we went to Huaqiangbei a lot. I think now, in terms of the places in the city, I always just think in terms of shooting. Like, to be honest, I've seen so much of the city mostly through the lens, mostly through going for location scouts, going for shoots, even like the beaches. Like, we've explored a lot of the beaches in Dapeng. We've shot in Dongmen Market, what you were talking about. We've shot in Huaqiangbei many times. So now, more often than not, like, I don't go and hang out at places. I just go and film there. That's more of my life.
Really fascinating. I would love to, chat more about this aspect. But I think for most of the creative, entrepreneurs, as well as the CMOs are tuning, they definitely want to, pick your brains about what, your strengths are, which definitely, in terms of as owning, a film production company, as a CEO there in Zen and Zany and Zen. Is that the right name to pronounce for your studio?
Yeah, Zen and Zany. So actually, it's kind of like our take on yin and yang. And when we first got here, we wanted to figure out a way to establish an identity that talked about how we are bringing in like our experience from marketing and creating in the Western markets, and how we can fuse that with the Eastern sensibilities, the Eastern way of working, and kind of create a great fusion. So it's kind of like East and West, yin and yang, and Zen and Zany. So that's where our name also comes from.
Zen and Zany. I really love that name. And,
Thank you.
A situation right now in the whole world, in fact. But the thing about being China is that you guys had it earlier than the rest of the world. And of course, you guys are also the first to reopen, with the COVID-19 after the initial lockdown, right? So my question for you is that as a film production company, are you in a bit of a tricky situation earlier with COVID-19? And now that, you have reopened for already 2 months, right? I believe, or 2 or 3 months. Is the situation there still very tricky with COVID-19?
It's so tricky. It's tricky because you're right. We have been out of phase with the rest of the world. And in terms of our work, first, because we were one of the first ones to be affected, we were also one of the first ones to have to pause our work. And it was completely unprecedented. Like, we had absolutely no way to figure out, like, what should we be doing. for a little while, because we actually, for us, the story was that right around the time that it was becoming news was around Chinese New Year. And we had a shoot scheduled right after Chinese New Year. And for us, we had to take the decision to delay it. And we didn't even know how big the entire thing would blow up. So for us, the decision to just delay the shoot was so important, because normally we don't delay our shoots no matter what, like unless it's like pouring or unless there's like a huge emergency like this, we try to always shoot on time. So for us, it was a very big deal. We delayed our shoot for about 3 or 4 weeks. We couldn't shoot. All the studios were closed. The actors were out of town. The crew was out of town. A lot of times our crew goes back to their hometowns for Chinese New Year, because Shenzhen is also a basically an immigrant city. So we were totally like on lockdown, and we couldn't proceed with our projects for about 3 to 4 weeks. We do feel we were actually one of the very first filming teams in Shenzhen to go back to work, because we had this pending shoot, and our client wanted to launch very quickly. So we were back in the studio filming, I believe in early March. In very early March, we were already there, and we were really, really super cautious. We had to like observe all of the precautions and then some. And it was really tricky because we also had children on set for that shoot. So it was very memorable. And since then, we did a few other shoots in March and in April. And we've just had to we've had to change our entire way of filming, because we've had to make sure that we observe social distancing on set as much as possible, limit contact, limit interaction, eat separately. It's very, very unprecedented. And I think a lot of other filming teams have actually, I think, stopped working altogether, because that makes sense. I think if there is no way to ensure that everyone's wearing a mask, that everyone's observing precautions. But luckily, some of the processes were so well followed that it was easier for us to go back to work quickly. So yeah, it's definitely been very tricky.
And it's great that you guys have sort of find a way to work around this situation, and have managed to get a few projects resume again, right? And so this is really heartening to hear. And of course, there are some news and reports coming out from China that there was a new spike of a second wave of cases. Is that something that you're concerned about? And is this going to disrupt some of your timelines again and throw all your projects into chaos?
It's so unpredictable. I think that China is definitely, like, the way that we are working with it and dealing with it, we've definitely been one of the most cautious work environments, for sure. We are still, like, even at work, we work out of a co-working space, and we wear masks all day, every day. We don't take them off unless we're eating, and even then, like, we go away to eat. So in terms of precautions, we haven't stopped. But in terms of business, it's really hard to say. I think that, as far as I can tell, everyone wants to keep working, especially in Shenzhen. It's like the city is so fast, and there's something specific, like there's something called Shenzhen speed. We always pride ourselves on Shenzhen speed, that, things get done here faster than anywhere else that, we've heard of, even faster than New York, for sure. And I do feel like businesses will be very reluctant to close down again. And we feel that, in terms of our projects, we definitely want to keep going. But of course, the health comes first and precautions come first. So it's kind of, I think we're really at the super early stages right now. I think we're following what's happening up north really closely.
That's a great update. I think that really benefits a lot of those CMOs. They travel to China a lot for their work. And of course, maybe some plans have actually been halted because of this COVID-19. Of course, the travel restrictions are not helping, right? And of course, if we hear that things are slowly going back to normal, there are some pipelines or even plans to re-enter China for those brands, especially, or even startups, right? We are looking to use China as the place for them to expand their business into, and of course, being a huge part of Asia. We're gonna, pick your brains a bit more, especially on video consumption habits in terms of in a big city like Shenzhen in China, for example, versus New York. how different or how big the contrast between both video consumption habits of the population there, and of course for your brands and for your clientele as well. Do they have different requests or demand for video consumption and marketing?
I think the demand is quite similar because it's always about creating the right kind of marketing material and the right kind of branding for clients. I think that in terms of the way that clients go about working through projects is probably very, very different. So just to give you an example, in New York, everything is super structured, and they kind of follow what we would call laid back timelines. And you can imagine if I'm calling a city like New York laid back, how crazy Shenzhen must be. So when I first came here, I was used to the way of working in New York. So when a client would come to me, I would, let them know that, yeah, okay, so I received your brief, let me get back to you in a week. And that was super normal for New York. No one would, question you if you said that in New York. And here they're like, a week, like you're kidding me, right? Like, can you tell me in 2 days? Can you come and present in 2 days, or can we have a meeting tomorrow? Can we have a meeting today? So now I'm very used to it. Now I know that taking a week over something is actually, in Shenzhen time, taking a week is something like taking 3 weeks anywhere else. You would only do it for like something that's complicated, something that really deserves that much time. But a week is a long time, a big chunk of time, the way that things work here. Everything is just, everyone expects like super hyper fast updates, quick processes. So that was the biggest change, I think, for me, for us, and to really be competitive, to really work in marketing and branding and make sure that, we are able to give our clients, the best kinds of projects, with the best quality in the quickest period of time. It's always a struggle. So it's always about time in Shenzhen for us. And you probably can imagine that the hardest thing to marry is creativity and time. Sometimes it just totally works, but sometimes it's hard to be creative on the spot, really quickly, on demand. But we've had to figure out our own ways around it, our own processes to trigger that creativity, to structure that creativity, and then to make sure we deliver on time.
How about during the outbreak of the COVID-19, right? With people mostly confined indoors during the height of the outbreak, are short video platforms in China also experiencing a remarkably sharp rise in user activity, especially during the initial stages of the outbreak? And what's your take in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world right now, right? We see TikTok having record-breaking growth in terms of people who have signed up an account and, of course, use that platform to push out content, deliver content, and brands, especially advertising more on platforms like TikTok, especially. What's the trend over there in China?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're totally right. So we studied this trend over the past few months, and definitely video platforms have experienced explosive growth. Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, definitely is going strong. It had been going strong previously as well, but in terms of live streaming has kind of become a super norm now in the new normal, where every single brand has basically jumped on the live streaming bandwagon, it seems. And lately, even CEOs of companies have started live streaming. Farmers have started live streaming. So that seems to be the biggest trend to come out of COVID-19 media consumption habits in China. Now, actually, we in marketing, we are now trying to figure out how to improve the level of live streaming, the quality of the streams. I was just part of a marketing summit 2 weeks ago, where one of the subjects was, how do we make sure that the live streams are not just ways to sell? And this is also a trend that's coming out of research on media consumption habits during COVID-19, that while consumers are very open to receiving messages during this time, they are not open to very overt sales calls. They don't really want to be sold to. They want brands to understand how complex the situation is right now. They want brands to help. in one way or the other. It doesn't have to be charitable, of course. It can be brands using their expertise, or people or influencers using their expertise and helping in whatever way they can by, giving information or giving entertainment, anything, to ease the situation. So I think that message is hard to communicate sometimes to companies here, because we are so sales focused. Everything is, has to lead to sales. So that is one of the messages that we've definitely tried to deliver to our clients, to see how they can tweak their messaging strategy at this stage to be cognizant of and sensitive to the new normal and to the fact that they are talking to an audience that is under duress.
That's a great take. I think you hit it in the head. We are definitely very interested to find out more in terms of these video campaigns, right? Which is a huge chunk of your business. You help brands and businesses design video campaigns as well. So we want to pick your brains in terms of how to actually more effectively develop video campaigns into many categories. You mentioned earlier about live streaming, which is something that is happening, that is, rage these days, with everyone popping up every 5 minutes of a live stream, right? Including myself. So I want to ask you, what are the video campaigns that brands can really leverage on besides live streaming? How-to videos and brand image videos are a big part of doing video campaigns as well?
Yeah, I think that something that we have been observing in China is that a lot of brands think of one major launch video, one major brand video, and they don't really plan for a longer term video strategy. They don't think that video can be a tool that they can use within their marketing strategy for different platforms, different audiences, different stages of the sales funnel. And that's something that we have been working with our clients to really understand and integrate. So I think that is the one thing that we help our clients do, to really understand how powerful video can be for different types of content. So definitely, it starts with a brand video. It starts with a product video. Maybe it goes to tutorials. We include, of course, live streams, like you said. We would include factory tours. We could include videos that have like Ask an Expert or Ask Me Anything. We would have a whole segment on user-generated content, whole segment on working with KOLs, and all this different kind of content kind of feeds back into the brand identity and into what we call the visual strategy of the brand. So that's something that we've been helping a lot of Chinese brands kind of understand. We really want them to feel that, like international brands do this really well. And I think for Chinese brands, a lot of times it's just one video at a time, instead of looking at it in the long term with that kind of vision of using videos at different stages to create an overall brand image.
And I think the next question will definitely interest a lot of startup founders, who make up 20% of our audience right here. They want to know how you can exactly help, startups to, achieve growth and, of course, to scale in China. And maybe you can cite one example where you recently did a video campaign for a startup, I think, where you helped the team launch, a portable scanner brand. And you gave him a lot of cash, right, on crowdfunding platform. So maybe walk us through that project and what are the things that you learned from that project?
So yeah, I think so. We've worked a lot with crowdfunding campaigns. A lot of our clients are actually clients that are looking to expand into the overseas market. So we've done a lot of work for Western markets for Chinese brands. So the campaign that you're talking about was called Caesar. And we did 2 different crowdfunding campaigns with them, where we worked with them to understand their brand personality, their key audiences, and what our challenge was to create a whole kind of a meaningful experience around the scanner. So at the end of the day, this is a smart scanner, which means that when you think of a scanner, normally you don't think of something exciting or something very cool. But we wanted to make this scanner cool, exciting, and meaningful. So we tried to figure out what are the results that you get? Like after you scan something, what kind of value does that final result hold for you? So we realized that people scan documents for different kinds of reasons. Designer might scan their designs, their creations, A parent might scan drawings made by their little ones. People might scan objects. So this scanner was creating a way to enable them to remember and digitize their memories, their creations, their notes if they're students, comic books. So we figured out the use cases, and we figured out what is it that you can scan that adds meaning and value to your life. We worked with the brand to create the audience personas that resonate with the brand. So we created 3 different audience personas for this brand. First was a student who would use a scanner to scan their notes or scan books. And then we actually got a lot of great hits from comic book nerds, comic book geeks that love preserving their old comic books. And then we also looked at how a business person or an entrepreneur who might not have a huge office or a scanner in their office, they can use a portable smart scanner like this one to quickly scan documents on the fly, invoices, contracts, all kinds of documents. So we helped the brand identify these 3 target audiences, and then we created a video that encapsulated these use cases. So that's the way that we usually work with our clients, that we really work with them to understand their branding strategy, their target audience, the whole media landscape, their competition, and then we work with them to create the video that hopefully would kind of address their key target audience in a meaningful way.
This is fantastic. I think this is really helpful for startups, for brands that want to raise funds through crowdfunding, and of course for the established brands as well. And we understand that in 2016, right, you co-founded Zen and Zany. So you help so many brands create videos for the Western markets as well. And the best thing is that within 2 years, you managed to successfully complete more than 40 projects. What are the ones that you're most proud of?
That's a great question. For me, I think every project has a special place. I think I still remember the very first project that we did. It was 5 years ago. It was, the very first crowdfunding campaign that we did. And it was a bunch of ultimate Frisbee players who had designed their own bag. It was called the Ultimate Bag. And it was supposed to be a bag that all ultimate Frisbee players would use at all times, and it was this fantastic little bag with pockets and all kinds of things that an ultimate player would be very useful for them. And I remember that was when I first had a meeting with those guys, and I told them look, we're very new. I am at this point a grad student I've just graduated. I know how to do this, but you guys would be our first crowdfunding campaign. And they took that risk. They believed in our work. They saw the projects I had done in New York, and that was a great boost. It was the first time that we got a commercial client. And so for me, that was definitely a memorable campaign, though it was really small. At the time, it was just my husband and me, because we are partners, and he was doing the camera work. I was doing the direction and the producing. I had a few of our acquaintances and ex-students because I was doing workshops at one point. So we had them come in and form our crew. So it was a very small production, nothing hi-fi, nothing high-tech, but the fact it meant a lot to me. And then over the years, something that I always find bits to remember about every project, because for me, the most joyful part is getting to know about the industry and about kind of jumping into the universe of that client that we are working with. So over the years, we've gotten to learn about all kinds of things, from bags to scanners to candles to robot vacuum cleaners. We are now working on a campaign for a time-lapse camera. So with each product comes its own little universe of knowledge and things that we need to learn. So it's quite fascinating for me. Each project holds a lot of exploration value, and I really love that. I love kind of diving into different worlds, and I think that's something that working as an agency gives you that working on the client side doesn't give you, because when you're part of a company, you are always, of course, you have a range of products like P&G did, but it wouldn't be this vast, like, jumping from the household genre to electronics, to consumer electronics, to B2B. We've done a whole bunch of work, for example, with Global Sources, which is a B2B platform for connecting suppliers with buyers. And that was all like in the B2B world. So we had to get out of B2C and go to B2B and figure out what works for in the B2B context.
And of course, the Global Sources is an event that everyone around the world, travel to Hong Kong for. And that's one of your biggest clients to date. And of course, you worked with almost 40 video campaigns already so far, right? So maybe it's a good time for us to, at this point, take a look at some of your best of your video production work, and maybe walk us through what are we watching here right now. Are you able to see this on the screen?
Yes, I can. Good research.
We are lower the volume. You can tell us, the process of coming up with something like this. It looks so cyberpunk and Blade Runner 2049.
Yes, I'm so glad that you found this campaign. This is definitely one of our shining showpieces. We love this campaign and this video. So the client came to us with a vision. They said that we don't want to create a sales-oriented video. We want to create a video that showcases the spirit of this brand, and this brand is all about being alternative, underground, being gritty. And we decided to create this whole microverse of this cyberpunk girl. So this is a girl in this futuristic universe that is going out to score these vapes. So it's like this future world where CBD vapes are totally outlawed. And she is picking them from this master dealer, and then she's going to be distributing them later on. And this was the first video to introduce her character, to introduce what the universe was about. And then we did 3 other social media videos that were shorter, and they showed how she was dealing to others and distributing them. So this was all shot in Shenzhen. And for us, the challenge was to really transform the locations we used, using our lighting, using our practical effects, and then of course a lot of stuff in post as well. And this is probably one of our best received videos because people really dig the cyberpunk feel. And for us, it was definitely a very interesting undertaking to figure out how do you transform essentially an empty basement and a window of an apartment and the little street outside the studio into the cyberpunk world. And we got a lot of great people on the crew for this. This is another reason why I really love working, in filmmaking, because it's always a team. I definitely like being at the center of it. I like having that creative control as the director, but I know I cannot do this. I would not have been able to do this by myself. No way. So we had great art directors who created the entire scene, did like spray painted the set, created designs, got custom pieces. We had a makeup artist who created the entire look. We had a tattoo artist who created all the fake tattoos on the actors and also worked with us to actually custom design the tattoos, because at one point we said, okay, we want the brand name, the client's brand name tattooed on this girl's neck. And so this artist had to create the whole design around that and then recreate it every time we shot. So it was definitely a huge, the team coming together. And that was the exciting part, especially for me, and definitely for all of us. It was a great team effort.
It looks fantastic as well. And something Thank that you. Is really, top of mind, even, after you watch that clip, right, for maybe a couple of months, you can still remember it. And of course, the brand on the neck as well. I think these are some of the things that brands, can really achieve by, putting out visually, appealing and memorable campaigns like this. And when I watch that, it reminds me of Berlin in Germany, even New York in America, right? It's like the kind of culture and the kind of feel and the artistic elements actually, all produced in Shenzhen by your company. I think it's something that's really remarkable and really struck me the first moment when I saw it. We still have maybe a couple more questions to go. How much time have we got left?
Sure, we can keep going.
because I'm gonna deep dive into some of your filmmaking inspiration, because you're a filmmaker, you're not just a CEO, yeah, and of course you are a great person to maybe ask for advice in terms of like, for those of the minor segment of our audiences, they are in the creative side of the industry, and some of them are new learners. So if you have film students that come up to you and I want to ask you whether it's more important for style or for skills to come first, what would you advise for them? And also, how important is storyboarding?
So I get asked, these questions a lot, and I feel like right now there are two, and actually there have been two kind of divergent approaches to getting into filmmaking and to learning more. There is the old school approach of, going back to school and getting a degree or getting a diploma. Or there is, the approach of kind of learning as you go along and figuring it all out. I have often observed that the former approach leads to a more structured output. But of course, at the end of the day, there's only so much that film school can teach you. For me personally, film school was the answer because that's just the way I like doing things. I like being in school. I like academia. I enjoyed my experience in New York thoroughly, and I would not trade that for anything. So I would not, and I also don't do really well being a self-starter. But for those people that are great self-starters, I often encourage them just to figure out a little part of it first, because I think one of the main things for beginners is getting overwhelmed because there's so much out there. There's so much on the technical side of things, and there's so much on the creative side of things. And something that a lot of videographers or one-man bands don't understand is exactly what I was saying earlier, that it literally takes a village to make a film, to make a short film, or to make a commercial. Very few people on any set would be able to tell you that I can also do camera work, I can also do lighting, I can also direct, I can also produce. No, people specialize. But that's why I notice now, because with the divergent pathways and the democratization of media, anyone can buy a camera, anyone can start experimenting. People are actually under more and more pressure to learn every single thing about the video making process. And sometimes that can just be overwhelming. So something that I also, because I taught film for a while, something I would tell my students, something I tell beginners is always, you don't have to know it all. And definitely, this is linked to your second question, definitely scripting and storyboarding is super important. I think a lot of people are just trigger happy. They want to get a camera, they want to start shooting. But actually, most film people will tell you a camera is sometimes the least important part of the equation. It's more important to know what is your vision, what is the script, what is it that you want to shoot, what is your inspiration, what are the reference videos, what locations do you have, what kind of talent do you have access to, what is the schedule looking like. For us as well, very often people say that, what are you filming today? Or you must be, your life must be at the studio. Actually, we're only in the studio like once a month, maybe twice a month, because that's how often you can shoot. You cannot possibly shoot more often than that without compromising on quality. So we spend at least 70 to 80% of the time either doing pre-production, which is all of the scripting, storyboarding, getting all the resources, getting everyone on board, planning with them, or post-production. So definitely, I think storyboarding, scripting, planning, for me, is a huge part of it, and that's what I always advise beginners as well.
What are your roots in filmmaking, and which film directors inspire you greatly?
I have always been a huge fan of Richard Linklater. I always loved his work. Boyhood? Did you say Boyhood?
Yeah.
Yes. So Boyhood was one of his later works.
Film, I think in the last 10 years, came out about 10 years ago, right?
Yes, yeah. So, for those of you guys who haven't watched Boyhood or who don't know about it, Boyhood is an amazing experiment in filmmaking where Linklater chose the same cast of people. They were all actors. And what he did was that he wanted to create realism by letting the natural amount of time pass by that was depicted in the film. So the whole film was shot, I believe, over 15 years, where we see this boy growing up in the film. And that has actually been very close to his approach overall. So I've been a fan of his from before the Before Sunrise trilogy, but I guess the Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight trilogy was also one of his amazing pieces. And it's always with him. It's always been about like, where does the real end and where does the fiction begin? And that's what I love. And that's something that also drew me into filmmaking and also documentaries. And something that I did inspired by that was that I did this project called 7,000 Miles, which was kind of like a study of people in New York and people in Pakistan living 7,000 miles apart. And I just wanted to actually document a day in their lives. And I also wanted it as an exercise for me as a writer and director to just observe, how do people live? How do they eat their breakfast? How do they greet their friends? How do they brush their teeth? Is there a difference or is it the same? So for me, Linklater has been a huge inspiration in that way.
And of course, the Sunrise trilogy has really watchable characters and actors like Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy as well. So who is your second most admired or filmmaker that really inspired you?
I would say, this answer is like so typical, but I think Lynch is one of those. I think for me, the second place is kind of tied with a lot of stuff. Also TV. I think for me, like Aaron Sorkin, and the whole new wave of TV in the gold and the post-golden era. It's TV has been fantastic. I think as a film person, I've been watching more TV than ever before, and I seek out interesting series that I find very, very meaningful and significant, and I find them to be actually more valuable than films, because sometimes you can follow characters on their journeys and create, develop deep relationships with them. But yeah, to answer your question, I think for me it would be so many. Charlie Kaufman, another one of them. So yeah, Charlie Kaufman, David Lynch. These guys they're all amazing. They're amazing at what they do, and I think to even kind of achieve a tiny, infinitesimal fraction of what they've achieved would be amazing. I think they touch so many lives and they create meaning for so many people.
I absolutely love David Lynch as well. Lost Highway, Twin Peaks, yeah. So these are all classics. Yeah. And of course, I understand that you also have a lot of interest in documentaries. Did you watch 13? The documentary that's been spoken about because of Black Lives Matter recently. I think it's done by Ava DuVernay. I think if I get her name correctly. Is she also one of your inspirations?
I didn't catch the name that you were asking me about.
I think it's Ava DuVernay who directed this beautiful documentary called 13. It's about the Black Lives Matter, about how the Black population in America prejudice against, and of course some of the hardships that they go through over the years, starting with lynching, and then all these KKK and all this culture where Black people are basically disadvantaged, and of course racism is a huge thing, right? So that's a documentary that really caught my eye recently. What are some of the other documentaries that caught your eye?
It's really interesting. I think that for me, I don't think I've watched a lot of documentaries very recently. I think for me, a lot of the work that I've seen in the past has been it's more about how the story is told in an entertaining way. So actually, I would like to say I'm actually a very picky watcher when it comes to documentaries. I often abandon them, and I often find the interview approaches to be too dry for me. I think something that I really enjoyed was Netflix's docu-series on design. I believe it was called Abstract or Abstract Design. And they did and they did a 4 or a 5-part mini series, and each part was about one specific designer. And actually, they didn't have just designers; they also had filmmakers, they had typographers, and it was about the process of inspiration for them. I think that was the last thing that I watched. It was maybe a month or 2 months ago that I really enjoyed watching, because I like I think I like studying. I like the study of people, so I really enjoyed seeing like how these people found inspiration and kept going, and how they kind of had their creative journeys, because that's always a black box for me. I never understand. I think even now, like being in the creative industry, I don't think I have such a clear grasp of how creativity works. It's so hard to explain, so hard to understand.
That's brilliant. And, before we let you go, I'm definitely going to try to squeeze in one last question, because we rarely have people video calling in from China, because the firewall is really hard to get through. I still remember an episode, when I was in Shenzhen, I have to upload a video that I made for a client, and I had to take the train, I think, and go to the Apple store in Hong Kong, I think in Lang Kwai Fong, just to upload that video and go back to Shenzhen for my next meeting, because the firewall is really frustrating. I'm just glad that today we tested this, and it seems to work pretty well so far. I can see you clearly. There's hardly any frozen images. So I'm going to ask you one last question. What's the hardest lessons that you learned working and, basing yourself in China? Maybe you can share this with those who are thinking of giving up or fleeing China, because of the hurdles that they face. And also, right now with the COVID situation, again, it makes it even harder, right, to survive in China. But of course, you're not just someone who has decided to just set your roots there in China, but you have also stayed there and continue working there and having so many great video campaign projects. So tell us some of the hardest lessons that you have learned so far.
I think that the hardest lesson was to get used to the Chinese way of working. I think for me, it's really strange, right? Because I also come from the East. I come from Pakistan, which is, very much a part of Asia. But I think my training, my work training was in the corporate world, and it was very much inspired by and dictated by the American work ethic and the way that, the US way of doing things. And that was the biggest change that I had to adapt to, because China just does not work that way. Chinese companies don't have clear, well-defined decision-making processes. They also make decisions in very different ways. In the US or in an American company, for example, you would have a very clear single point of contact for a project, and you would have a clear decision maker. And also a lot of people along the line would be very empowered to make decisions, in their own right. And that is just a more of a
I think we just lost you there. So it's funny that we are nearing the end of the program, and then we suddenly have this cut off. So maybe I will try to get you back on again, and if that's not possible, we can actually end the episode right here. Let's see whether you're able to come back. I think I see you again. Can you maybe try to come back in? Oh, you're back.
I'm back, I think. This was just
all the VPN issues.
Yes. So I think for me, getting used to the way that Chinese companies work was probably the biggest challenge, the biggest way of adapting. And it's also a challenge for us, because within our company, even though our
All right. Let's see whether we can add her back to the stream. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Let's hope she's able to come back on again. Let's see. Nausheen, if you can hear me on your device, try to re-enter the studio. Try to exit the broadcast studio and then re-enter again. See whether it works. if we are not going to be able to get you back on, we can maybe do so in the future when we re-invite you back on the podcast and maybe dive deeper into, video production and, of course, to pick up brains about video campaigns, marketing, and visual strategies as well. So I think that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Today we had, Nausheen, who shared with us from China some of her insights. I think she's back. Yes.
Gosh, sorry, right? Unpredictable.
Unpredictable, yes. We're going to let you finish, what you were covering earlier, and then your last message for our audience before we hit the 1 hour mark. Yeah, please continue.
I think that was basically, I don't know how much of that you caught between the disconnections, but yeah, I think getting used to a different way of working, especially in terms of decision making, in terms of feedback, in terms of the processes, that was the biggest challenge. And I would like to say that I am more used to it now, and we have our own mechanisms of dealing with it, and we expect it now. And more often than not, we're not taken by surprise. So that has definitely been the biggest challenge. And I think that might be one of the things that does frustrate people that are not used to this way of working, and that is understandable. It was definitely an adjustment period for us as well.
Fantastic. Maybe for the benefit of those who are interested to work with you guys, and of course, for anything to do with video marketing, especially video strategy as well, visual strategies for brands, businesses, and startups, where can they find you? And what is your last message to our audiences who are tuning in right now?
Well, for anyone who is on WeChat is usually the best and the quickest way to find me or anyone else in China. My username on WeChat is Sheen. So just the first letter of my name and the last part of my name, Sheen. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think that would be an easy way to connect as well. And in terms of a message, I guess, who was the message for?
For the audiences that were either, watching this live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook and Twitch, or, we're playing this on Spotify podcast, Google, and Apple.
Yeah. Well, I would say from the point of view of a person who is in video marketing, anyone who's watching, if you are thinking about using video as a tool for your marketing, stop thinking and create your first video. Just start and then figure out how to keep improving it as you go along. But right now is not the time to keep thinking about creating videos. It's already the golden age of video, of online video. And if you have already created videos, then I would encourage you to think about, why did you create this content? What did it do for you? Have you measured it? Have you tried to figure out what are the KPIs? And have you that you've been following? And if you haven't been following a strategy, it would be the right time to create that visual strategy, to really think, how can I use video to amplify my marketing? How can I use video to convince people to go through my sales funnel strategy, to go through my sales funnel process to get more clients? And now videos are really being used at every single stage of the sales funnel, whether you are a B2B business or a B2C business. So really it's about refining it, streamlining it, and using video as a tool for you at different stages for different audiences and different platforms. So I hope that you're thinking of video strategically as a tool in your tool belt to use at any point in time.
That's fantastic. And of course, the URL is right below here. So for those who want to check, the website and check Zen and Zany out, this is the website to go to. And, I really learned a lot from you today about visual strategy, video production, video marketing, and even about some of your favorites and most inspired filmmakers. So this has been a great podcast and a great way to sign off with you, sharing with us some of these great takes as well. So I'm really privileged and really appreciate you for coming onto the podcast. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Nausheen, and we thank you so much for coming on again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you and engaging with you. And this is a brilliant podcast. And thank you so much. It was really very insightful.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.